While some online bullion dealers continue to charge $4 over spot for US Mint Silver Eagles, SD Bullion is selling 2016 Silver Eagles for just $2.29 over spot for any quantity. Again, that's just $2.29 over spot for any quantity. If you haven't joined over 25,000 new customers by making the switch to SD Bullion, what are you waiting for? You could save hundreds or even thousands of dollars on your next order. SD Bullion, the lowest prices, period.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah Johnson with FinanceandLiberty.com, and back with us today is Bix Weir from RoadToRuta.com. Bix, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, it's nice to be on with you.
All right, well, I'd first like to discuss how you see the economic meltdown coming in the second half of 2016, and that's right now. It's basically within the next 6 months, you see?
Oh, definitely, and you can see it starting. I mean, yes, the markets are still 100% manipulated. The Fed is in there buying stocks, keep supporting the stock market. They're keeping gold and silver prices down. They're doing everything they can to keep this game going for the last few months of at least a 40-year manipulation. But you can also see the cracks and really exciting things going on behind the scenes with the banks and what's going on with the derivative market, that weapon of mass financial destruction that nobody seems to be talking about. It's really interesting that, banks like Deutsche Bank, the stock is crashing, bad news coming out every day, and nobody talks about them holding 50 trillion plus in derivatives and what would happen to the system if they did go down.
And that's what you've been talking about, is you see that Deutsche Bank will be the trigger for the global financial meltdown?
There could be many triggers, but Deutsche Bank is the most likely trigger because the real guts of the problem, just like in 2008, is the derivative situation. Now, derivatives were created to control the financial markets and the metal markets because they couldn't sell real metal, but if prices were determined by derivatives of metal, they can run their game as long as they want. Silver right now is trading at least 500 billion ounces of derivative silver every year. 500 billion ounces, and there hasn't been that much, even close to that much mined in the history of the world. So, and this is happening every year. And the derivative game is exactly where they control prices and rig prices. The derivatives of the U.S. dollar make it a non-event that the Saudis are going to sell 700 billion in U.S. denominated assets or monetary assets even. The real thing is that trillions upon trillions of dollars of U.S. dollar derivatives are traded in every day. They estimate 5 trillion a day is traded in the FX, the foreign exchange markets. That's just partial derivative. I mean, it's really 10 to 20 trillion and more every single day. So, the 700 billion coming out of Saudi Arabia is not going to make a lick of difference as far as the value of the dollar and where the market riggers place the dollar at any given time.
Now, what is your perspective? Have you heard about George Soros saying that we're headed towards basically a big economic meltdown? He said earlier this year that we were going to see a repeat of 2008, and now just recently he's saying that he's selling his stocks and buying gold and gold miners. I guess, what is your perspective on that?
Well, Soros is an interesting guy because nobody's really sure who he works for, if he works for the bad guys, if he works for the good guys. I'd say he's one of the bad guys. But right now, both the good guys and the bad guys want the system to crash. The bad guys want it to be delayed till around the election time, and the good guys want it to happen any time between now and the end of September. So it's a question of who's going to pull the trigger first, or you don't even have to pull the trigger. All you have to do is stop the manipulation, and instantly all markets would implode because the derivative market would implode. So, yeah, Soros he's probably the mouthpiece of the bad guys. Bad guys definitely want the system to implode around the election time, and then they want a year and a half of chaos, and then come in and save the world with their one world government. The good guys want to take it down earlier, and at least in the United States, it's time that we take responsibility for this mess we've created and we're living in. So I think the plan of the good guys is to make the collapse happen. You know, it's kind of starting now. If you look at just Friday, just yesterday, the start, at least you can see a little bit of a wobble in the stock market finally, with the banking stocks starting to fall, and Deutsche Bank, you know, the biggest derivative holder, dropping beneath $16 a share. I think there's a trigger for some of their cocoa bonds at that number, because somebody's been defending it. We'll find out in the next coming weeks. If the banks continue to fall and you start to see Deutsche Bank's stock go lower and lower, I'll guarantee you there's massive fire going on behind the scenes in their derivative book.
What impact do you think the UK leaving the European Union would have? I know Soros recently talked about this, and he thinks that if the UK leaves the European Union, then this could basically be the end of the EU.
The EU will end anyway. The question is, you know, will the countries, all the European countries who are in the EU now, what are they going to do? By everybody going on the euro, at least, you know, in mainland Europe, everybody going on the euro absolutely destroyed their hope for going off on their own. They're going to all need to print their own currencies again and go back to the drachma and, you know, the all the other currencies of Europe, the franc, because you need to control your own country. Giving the power to print money to the EU, something completely outside of your sovereign duty, that is a really bad thing. And Greece is finding out that problem right now, because they want to get out of the euro, but they don't know what to use as money. You know, they got rid of the drachma and now they use the euro, and the European Union can just cut them off, literally, if they want to. And that's the power of the keyboard. You know, the euro is an electronic currency just like every other currency. So yeah, it could be pointed at as the reason for the collapse. You know, they can blame anything, but the real collapse will be caused by the stopping of the manipulation of the markets.
All right. Well, I was wondering if we could move a little bit to the precious metal markets now. You've recently discussed about silver industrial demand, and that you see an industrial panic to buy right now. This is starting and even making its way into the mainstream media. Did you want to discuss about this?
Well, this is something that Ted Butler has been talked about. I mean, he's talked about this for over 20 years, believe it or not, and his mentor. But it's obvious. Who are the biggest buyers of physical silver? It's not the mom and pops buying the coins and the bars as savings. It's the industrial use of silver. That's just the way things happened after the mid 1940s when we became an electronic society. So they're the big buyers of the physical stuff. They're the ones whose products do not go out unless they have physical silver. And physical silver is used in such small quantities for most of the applications that Apple is going to have to load up on physical silver, because there's physical silver in every iPhone. And why would they risk their product line and their company on not having access to physical silver when the manipulation ends? It is a no-brainer. If you own a company that requires physical silver to make your products, you should be getting every single COMEX bar out of there. They'll be melting down U.S. Eagles probably to make their products. They have to have silver in a lot of these products, and it's in such small amounts that they can spend $1,000 a bar and still make their product, which makes them millions. But they're gonna need the silver, and there's a lot of people going direct to the mines right now to get China's been doing this for years, but to get silver directly from the mines, because you don't know if it'll get refined and make it to market ever. That's the key, is when this thing falls apart because of the manipulation, because the prices have been kept so low for so long. Silver has been a necessary item in all these electronic products that probably would not have been made in the same way if silver was $1,000, $2,000 an ounce. It just, because the price has been so low, all of a sudden everybody uses silver in their products, and there's going to be a panic to get it.
All right. Now, I asked some viewers to submit some questions, and Michael McMillan asks, what limits how much paper, gold, or silver can be created and marketed?
Nothing. There are no position limits. Well, position limits only addresses how much a certain entity holds at the end of the day. During the day, 10 billion, 100 billion ounces of silver can trade hands, and there's no laws against that, and that's the game that's played. There is no limit on the amount of electronic silver and gold that can be bought and sold in the derivative market. The derivative market, meaning the COMEX and the LBMA, they're both derivative markets. They are not physical. There is a physical component to a delivery process, but they trade what they value in those exchanges are silver derivatives, not the price of physical silver.
Lorenzo asks, why do you think anything will change as long as the masses value the dollar?
Well, if a bank crashes, like Deutsche Bank, and they call them too big to fail banks because the failure of that bank would make every other bank fail. That's the definition of too big to fail, is that they are so big that if they fail, they would destroy the banking system. So the value of the dollar, I think, in the crash will go through the roof if people even use dollars anymore. Most dollars are electronic blips. So when these banks crash, the physical paper in your hand will be worth a lot more because there's no other money. And in the United States, we'll have our coins that we have in our piggy bank, and our, all the waiters and bartenders will probably be very wealthy because they keep, their fives, tens, and 20s in a jar by their bed. The reality is, all other electronic money is kept in these banks. So you, as an American citizen with money in the bank, have an electronic promise from a bank. When that bank closes, the credit defaults, which is exactly what will happen when one of these too big to fail bank goes down. All that money will be gone. FDIC doesn't have the money to replenish it, not even close. And before they have to do that, the FDIC has to pay for all the derivative messes, which Citibank put in the Dodd-Frank bill, that before anybody gets paid out from FDIC insurance, the FDIC first has to bail out the bank's derivative positions, which is hundreds of trillions of dollars. So basically that guarantees that the FDIC will not be there to cover any bank balances when the crash happens.
Now, I'd like to discuss a little bit about the election. You mentioned a little bit about the election earlier, and you've talked about recently how you're calling for Americans to unite. Did you want to discuss a little bit about this?
Sure. We're going to have the collapse. It's going to happen. There's nothing we can do about it. The good guys and the bad guys want it to happen. It's time for it to happen. There's just so many things that are complete problems, and the biggest problem is debt. There's way too much debt. To get rid of that, you got to form a collapse that is not stopped. In 2008, Hank Paulson stopped it. So if the United States is in the middle of a collapse, we cannot have division amongst our people. We all have to believe in the same leader, and there's no way that if Trump wins the election, there's no way the other side, the Bernie side and the Clinton side, is going to stand for it. They're going to literally go into revolution mode. And same with the opposite. If Clinton wins, we're all doomed. And if Bernie wins, there goes the economy, and the other side will go up into revolt. Here's the problem. During the election process, we're going to have an economic collapse. And the question is, do we turn to our government to help us out of this problem, where they steal all our freedoms, institute their own version of the next market manipulation 2.0, and try to jerry-rig the system again? Or do we start fresh with new leaders and really find out who the bad guys are within Congress? Because usually countries will turn to their government first, and when their government fails them, they don't have an out. There's no other way to go. If we have a real collapse and the banking system goes, we are in some serious hurt, because there's no food, there's no water. Nothing can survive off a system, in the system that we built, without the banks and without the flow of money. So it's a very scary time we're approaching, and the question is, who are we going to turn to? The only way I see this working out good for the United States is if we get everybody united. And to do that, it's not simple, and it may freak people out, but if we unite the people with Trump and with Bernie Sanders, and they run together on a single ticket, that would be very interesting. They both are hated by the Democratic and Republican parties, the establishment parties. But everybody's done with those parties anyway. It's easy to see how corrupt they always were, and now it's just more obvious. They handpick their candidates. I think the Republicans are going to boot Trump out of the nomination. I think there's talk brewing of it. So if Bernie Sanders gets disenfranchised and if Trump gets disenfranchised, why not just join them together? They're both, they're obviously polar opposites in certain things, but they also agree on a lot of things as well. On guns, they both want what's best for their country. They just have different ways of going about getting there. And so why not have like Trump as the president negotiating contracts and working on the economy, and Sanders as the vice president taking care of the people and helping reallocate money to the entire nation, because if the banks crash, everything crashes. I think that combination, there's a possibility to go forward. Without it, you're going to see revolution in the street because one side will be disenfranchised, and we can't have that during this transition.
Now, it seems like, even a lot of Republicans right now seem to not like Trump also, and they definitely wouldn't like Sanders. So it seems like there's a large sector of the population who doesn't like Sanders or Trump. So how do you see...
Hang on. The Republicans do like Trump. It's just the Republican establishment people who don't like Trump. Now, Trump, I think, is doing everything he can to get on the bad side of the Republican establishment. I think that's why he's making all these ridiculous comments. And I think he wants to get thrown out of the Republican Party. He's already built his base. He's got a huge following. Same with Sanders. He's got a huge following. You get those two together running not as a Republican and not as a Democrat, and you could see the potential for uniting the country and at the same time taking out the evil people within the two parties.
So you mentioned that you don't think Trump will actually get the nomination. How do you see them taking it away from him at the convention?
Well, a few days before the convention, they they decide on new rules. So they'll just change the rules, and a lot of the delegates that are Republican delegates were put there as Trump delegates, but if they can't decide on the first vote, it goes to a second vote. And a lot of them were put there on purpose so that they vote for someone else besides Trump. So there's a big effort to make sure that Trump does not get the establishment Republican nomination. And I think they're going to do it. I think Trump wants the same thing. He doesn't want to run as a Republican. He wants to run as an independent. Same with Barney Frank. He doesn't want to run as a Democrat. He wants to run as an independent. There's something going on behind the scenes. I just hope it gels and gets together by the time the economic collapse hits sometime this summer, because we're going to need strong leadership to move forward, and we need everybody on board. We need the far left and the far right. Far left is represented by Sanders right now, and the far right is represented by Trump. And the parties need to be taken out. I think it's possible, especially if you have Trump getting kicked out and Bernie Sanders being disenfranchised by the Democrat.
I know the last time I interviewed you, I think you were saying that if the economic collapse happens before the election, there might not even be an election. Is that what you said? And do you still see that as a possibility?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the election might not even be very important at all. If the United States of America is bankrupt because the government keeps their money in these banks too, there's going to be no money to hold an election. There will be. See, that's the problem. Is the system will stop. It's not like the government will continue going and continue trying to fix the problem. The government won't have any money. Everybody can go to Congress, and Congress is going to have to talk about reallocation of money, and that's a very, very difficult thing to talk about when all the rich have lost all their money and all the poor have lost all their money, and they've also lost all their debt, by the way, which is a bonus. But how the biggest problem, according to Greenspan in his book, is allocation of resources. Who should get what, or should a government even be in charge of that? There are many, many issues and problems that are going to come to our country. And the federal government was never meant to be this monstrosity that it is today. I think it's 35 or 40 million people work for the federal government in our country, which is crazy. It was supposed to be this tiny little part of our nation, powerful, but tiny. And everything else was supposed to go to the power is supposed to go to the states. But for some reason, we have let the federal government take over everything. So when the federal government fails, when the banks fail, will there be an election? I don't know. I think it's up in the air. Possibly. Will there be martial law? Probably. But is it a good thing or bad thing? I don't know. You might have people roaming the streets with guns. That's the problem that is being dealt with at the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Fed is what to do when this crash happens, because it'll be pure chaos. And I think we have to go through a little chaos to move forward. But I just hope it doesn't last months and years. And I'm hoping it's weeks and months.
Now, if the election does happen, you were saying that if Trump gets denied the nomination at the GOP convention, he should team up with Sanders and run as a third party. But how do you see that happening? Because I think it's too late to file, at least in Texas and maybe some other states. It seems like it would be pretty late to file for the election. How do you see them actually getting on the ballot and running?
Well, that gets back to, will the same rules apply when there's a banking crash? I don't think they will. I think all the phony rules that have been put in place, what is the law of the land is kind of the question. We'll be going, most likely in the U.S., we'll go back to the Constitution. Very limited powers for people to, decide this stuff. Yeah, they can, we can say, hey, we'll have a special election and you can vote for anything you want, because by the way, the Republican and the Democratic parties are absolutely corrupt, and all the people who are running them now are sitting in jail. So they're not going to decide, they can't jump up and down and say, wait, that's not our process. Your process was a joke in the beginning. It was not a law. It was what you set up for your system. We need to think smarter. We need to move to a situation where we are not told the rules on who we have to elect as our leaders. We need to elect people who would be best for the country and best for the people. And that cannot be accomplished through all these rules set up by, the Republicans and the Democrats, because their rules basically guarantee that one of their nominees will win the election. And the future is very different. These are criminal institutions, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and they're run like criminal institutions, and they handpick their candidates. Things are going to change after the crash. Those parties, they won't have any money. The Republican Party and the Democratic Party won't have a penny, just like everybody else. So they're not going to make any rules. It'll go back. Hopefully, people can get in Congress and we can try to sort this out. But both those parties will be long gone by the economic crash.
That's very interesting. And I mean, I know I've heard before that, and I think this is actually a possibility, is if, let's say, Trump gets denied the nomination, it wouldn't seem out of the realm of possibility of him actually just trying to do a write-in campaign. I mean, everyone would know about it. He gets media attention so quickly. I mean, if he tried a write-in campaign with, Trump and then Sanders as VP, I mean, it sounds far-fetched, but I mean, I think he might actually have a chance with a write-in campaign.
Well, yeah, if there is one, it gets back to, if this crash happens, pretty much everything's off the table, because there will be no money. It's not like the internet will work by itself. There's people behind that. Your internet won't be working if the companies that make electricity or handle your internet service, those companies will be out of business too, because they've got money in the banks. Everybody's got money in these banks. That's why a too big to fail bank is so dangerous, because that system stops. And we could talk all we want. But I think our very last thing we'll be worried about is who's going to be running for president.
Right. And I mean, do you see this being our last chance to basically have the good guys win? For
the good guys, it's definitely their last chance. The good guys meaning the people that I believe have been trying to take down the system from the work at the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston, the information that came out of there. This is Greenspan and people like that who are trying to destroy the monetary system and get us back to a gold standard. It's possible that we can do it, but they failed many times. They tried to do it in 2008, and the people weren't ready. They went to Congress for a bailout. At first, Congress denied them a bailout, the banks, and the stock market started to drop. So everybody said, "Oh no, let's give them $700 billion." Will that happen again? I don't think so. I think that people are ready to stand up. So if it doesn't happen now, you could pretty much kiss it goodbye, because there are so many things wrong with the system today. Too many have-nots and too few haves with everything, and too many have-nots. And the biggest problem with the rich, if you have too many poor, they want the majority of the wealth. But if you have too many people with the majority of the wealth, then the small worker bees are going to stand up and say, "We're done with this. We are absolutely done with this." And the election problems already are kind of a spark. And I hate to say it, but I do see rioting coming to the streets of America this summer.
I mean, unfortunately, aren't you already seeing rioting happening, at these Trump rallies by anti-Trump protesters?
Yeah, but that rioting is nothing compared to what's coming. I mean, we're talking guns. That's a different kind of rioting. And there's a lot of guns out there in America. The good thing about guns, I write about this in my new book, the good thing about guns is it's kind of an equalizer. We should all be carrying guns. It should be complete. You shouldn't even have to have a carry license. We should all be carrying guns, because it's going to get to that point. You got a few people breaking the rules, carrying guns to these rallies or these protests, and then the chaos just develops, and we and we shrink as a country, and then everybody's going to be walking around with a gun. They're almost doing it right now. I have a friend in Europe who's told his wife, "Keep this gun in your handbag," because you never know what's going on with all the imported refugees, as they call them, inciting this violence. It's just crazy over there. Same thing's going to be happening here. A year from now, we're all going to be wearing guns. Now, the good thing about everybody having a gun is that the problems aren't very big. Once a crazy shooter starts shooting, they're taken out very fast. So we're in for a different time when this election chaos starts, and the people aren't happy at all with what has happened. They're not happy with our government. They're not happy with Wall Street. They're not happy with anything. And they're going to voice that frustration. We're kind of seeing it already with the freezing of the EBT cards. People are starting to go crazy already because they're 10 days without their free handouts. What happens when they stop the free handouts? When the banks crash, there are no EBT cards. And it's JP Morgan's the one who facilitates that EBT game, and they're bankrupt. And they have been bankrupt since the whale thing fiasco, which was not $8 billion or $9 billion. It was more like 8 or 9 trillion that they're not telling you about. So yeah, everything's going to change this summer. You're seeing kind of a glimpse of it already, but it's going to get uglier and uglier as we get closer and closer to this to the election stuff and the Brexit. I don't see how we're going to get past. Maybe a lot of manipulation gets us into mid-July, but it's going to take a lot of manipulation to even get us that far. And then come August, September, I think it's over.
I guess to kind of wrap up, did you want to share with the viewers, what they can do to, when this collapse occurs, kind of help to have the good guys win, I guess, in a peaceful way, obviously? What kind of peaceful things can people do to have the good guys win?
I'd say it's up to the individual now. You need to educate yourself. That is the key. Educate yourself as to what has happened, so that when this crash hits, and prepare for going it alone for a little while. But I'm sending out next week. I'll be sending out a kind of a explanation video of how the Roto-Rooter was discovered, and it walks you through how to find out what's really happening behind the scenes. And if we can spread this information all over the world, then the government will have to come out and say, okay, yeah, we've been lying to you all this time. We know the crash is about to be here. And hopefully they'll say, we think the best way to get through this is to just have full disclosure. Tell everybody what's going on, and tell everybody the steps that we're going to take to change the way we live, because you cannot live in the type of world we live in, which is pure manipulation and pure fantasy anymore. We have to grow up, and we have to move out of mom's basement and get out there and start living. And the only way to do that is with complete and total knowledge and information of why these markets are rigged, how they're rigged. And we need to set up new markets, and so we can progress past this mess. Hopefully there are plans in place. I think there have been for a long time, but I think they're scared that their plans won't be accepted anymore by the people, because there's so many pissed off people.
Well, Bix Weir, before we let you go, did you want to share with the viewers where they can find you online, and any last thoughts you'd like to add?
I'm at roadtoroota.com. I've got my fourth book coming out on the 15th of June. It talks all about this stuff we're talking about right now. I've got that disclosure video about the Road to Ruta coming out on Sunday. So I just hope everybody takes the time to not only learn this information, but also spread it, because the only way we can get through this is by working together.
Great. Well, Big Weir, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Elijah.
This video was brought to you in part by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's latest interview with Robert Ellis Smith. Privacy guru Robert Ellis Smith, founder and editor of the oldest journal on privacy in the world, returns to Reluctant Preppers to spell out the many intrusions into our personal privacy and how to defeat them. Smith describes the simple ways to reclaim your inherent and constitutional right to keep your life and your business your own, despite intrusion from the NSA, the net, drones, and increasingly invasive technology. Plus, Smith shares breakthrough tips on cell phones, purchases, and medical records that you'll want to take action on right away.